My mom abandoned me when I was a kid, and now she disrespects my wife for not understanding her struggles. Me, 38, male, when I was 10, losing dad felt like the universe had suddenly tilted on its axis. It wasn't just a quiet, peaceful kind of passing. It was abrupt, shocking, the kind you replay in your mind over and over, trying to make sense of it. He was there one day, his laughter filling up our small living room, and then he wasn't. The details around his death were messy and painful, too much for a kid to really grasp, but enough that the memories just sort of stick with you. Mom took it hard. Really hard. She tried to hold it together, but you could see the strain in her eyes, the way her hands shook a little more each day. She wasn't the same after that. None of us were. Our home felt like a completely different world, one where the colors had faded and the sounds were muffled. Mom, who used to be the heart of our house, filling it with warmth and laughter, suddenly seemed like a shadow of herself. She'd sit at the kitchen table, staring blankly at the coffee she'd poured but never drank, lost in thoughts that clearly pained her. I remember the morning she told us about her decision to move back to her home country. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly, betraying the storm inside her. Our house, once vibrant with our family's daily routines, felt increasingly empty and silent. The walls echoed with the ghost of our past conversations, and each room held a memory of Dad's laughter or his comforting presence. Being there, Mom said, was too much of a reminder of what we'd lost. She needed space to grieve away from the environment that echoed his absence. "It's just for a little while," she said, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I need some time to heal, to find some peace." The word temporary hung in the air, but as a kid, I didn't grasp the full weight of what was happening. I just nodded, thinking she'd be back soon, that this was just a short break and everything would go back to normal. Mom's move, intended to be a brief escape from her grief, became a permanent arrangement. Her brief visits were filled with awkwardness and a palpable tension, as if she was a guest rather than the mother who had raised us. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the struggle to reconnect with the children who felt more like strangers now. As weeks turned into months and then years, the reality of her prolonged absence settled in. Birthdays and holidays came and went without her. Phone calls were our only bridge, her voice becoming less familiar over time, strained with a sadness that didn't seem to fade. Each call was a reminder of the widening gap between our old life with Dad and our new reality. After Mom left, it was the Nelsons who took us in. They were old family friends, the kind who had known us since we were in diapers. Mr. Nelson was Dad's college buddy, and Mrs. Nelson had been Mom's maid of honor. They tried to fill the void as best they could, turning their guest room into our new bedroom, stocking the fridge with our favorite snacks, and even trying to keep up the same holiday traditions we used to celebrate as a family. Despite their kindness, the house never quite felt like home. It was always a bit too clean, a bit too quiet, lacking the chaotic warmth that had filled our own home. At night, the walls seemed to echo with the silence, a stark reminder that this wasn't just a sleepover, that our mom wasn't going to be back at the end of the weekend. I remember lying in that guest bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to my sister breathe softly in the bed next to mine. She seemed to adapt better, or maybe she just hid her feelings more. Nights were the hardest for me. That's when the what-ifs would haunt me. What if I had been less of a hassle, quieter, easier to handle? Would Mom have stayed if I hadn't been so much like Dad, as she often said I was? These thoughts would spiral, and I'd find myself gasping for air, feeling that old familiar pang of abandonment. Mrs. Nelson would hear me sometimes, her soft knock on the door a prelude to her sitting by my bed, whispering reassurances, trying to soothe the fears and doubts that gnawed at me. But no matter how gentle her touch or kind her words, they couldn't replace the comfort that would have come from my own mom's embrace. This experience shaped how I parent my own kids. I've always made it a point to be there for them, to be a constant presence in their lives. I've gone overboard at times, maybe, being too protective, too present. I want them to feel secure, to know I'm always there, no matter what. Because the absence of my mom, her choice to distance herself when we needed her most, left a void in my life that I've sworn never to replicate in theirs. It's tough sometimes, knowing that Mom was just grappling with her own grief while trying to find a way to cope. I understand it on a rational level, but emotionally, it still stings. Accepting her decision has been one of the hardest parts of growing up, and even now, it's a struggle not to let that old resentment color the love I still have for her. My wife, a wonderful woman, we married and have 2 wonderful childs together. I met my wife in college, a stroke of luck that I still thank my stars for. We had both chosen the same dreary morning lecture, Economics 101, and it turned out the only thing more potent than our mutual disdain for the subject was our instant connection. She sat next to me on the first day, her presence a stark contrast to the monotonous tone of the professor. She had this way of scribbling notes that was almost artistic, her expressions flickering between amusement and exasperation. We started sharing notes, then coffee, and eventually, our dreams and fears. Telling her about my family came later, when our casual coffees had turned into long dinners and we started thinking about a future together. It was a summer evening, one of those perfect ones where the air is just cool enough to be comfortable. We were at a little park near campus, watching the sunset paint the sky in strokes of orange and gold. I felt the weight of my past nudging at me, urging me to open up about everything. I started with the good memories, my dad's roaring laughter, the way he used to scoop me up into the air, my mom's holiday cookies, and the noise of a house that felt full. But then I shifted to the hotter truths. I explained how things changed after Dad passed away, how the brightness dimmed and how Mom eventually moved away. I told her about the years of feeling adrift, being raised by family friends who were kind but couldn't fill the void my mom left. My wife listened quietly, her hand finding mine as I talked. Her eyes never left my face, and in them, I saw a well of empathy and understanding. When I finished, there was a soft sigh, a slight squeeze of her hand around mine, signaling her support. She didn't bombard me with questions or pity. Instead, she shared her own story of loss, how she grew up without grandparents and much of her extended family, which made her feel isolated in a different way. That night, I realized how much I needed someone who didn't just know my joy but also understood my pain. It felt like a burden had lifted, sharing my past with her, and her acceptance and understanding of my family's complicated dynamics only deepened my feelings for her. It was then I knew she was more than just a partner. She was my ally, someone who would stand by me through the complexities of life. Ever since I shared my family history with my wife, there's been this unspoken tension hovering around the subject of my mom. My wife, being the incredibly supportive partner she is, has always been understanding about my feelings but has harbored a certain reluctance towards my mom herself. It's not out of malice or disrespect, it's more about her struggle to reconcile the abandonment I felt as a child. With the woman she's met a few times since we got married, I've tried to explain to her that my mom was just trying to cope in her own way after my dad's death. She was grieving, lost without him, I'd say, hoping to bridge the emotional gap that my mom's departure had created not just in my life but now in our marriage too. It wasn't that she didn't love us, she just needed time. But to my wife, who sees the world through lenses tinted with fierce loyalty to family, the idea that a mother could leave her children in the care of others, regardless of the circumstances, is a pill too bitter to swallow. She's never rude about it, never dismissive of my ongoing relationship with my mom. She encourages me to call her, supports my trips back home to see her, and she's always the first to suggest we send gifts on Mother's Day. But she remains distant, a polite coldness setting the boundaries of their interaction. During family gatherings or holiday dinners when my mom is around, my wife is cordial but distant. She'll smile, engage in small talk, but there's a guardedness in her eyes, a firm line drawn that everyone seems to understand. "I'm here for you," she whispers to me, squeezing my hand under the table, a silent reassurance that her stance isn't meant to hurt me, but a boundary she sets for herself. It's a delicate balance, navigating this quiet standoff between them. I often find myself in the middle, an interpreter translating not just words but emotions and unspoken thoughts. I tell my mom, she's just fiercely protective of those she loves, hoping to soften her hurt at my wife's standoffish demeanor. To my wife, I gently remind, Mom has her flaws, but she regrets those years away, trying to kindle empathy in the ashes of past grievances. This dynamic, though far from ideal, has become a part of our life's rhythm. My wife's steadfast support of my relationship with my mom, without choosing to engage more deeply herself, speaks volumes of her respect for me, even if it's a compromise she silently bears. It's a silent testament to her strength and her deep understanding of my need to maintain that fragile thread with my past. Recently, I decided it was time for another trip back to my home country, to let the kids spend some time with their grandmother. My wife couldn't make it due to her demanding job, and while she encouraged us to go, I could tell she was relieved not to face the tension that usually accompanied these visits. I explained the situation to my mom when we landed, and she nodded, saying she understood, but her disappointment was palpable. The first few days were a blur of activities. My mom went all out, taking the kids to local parks and museums, filling our days with laughter and stories, almost as if making up for all the missed time. In those moments, watching her with the kids, it was easy to forget the complex layers of emotions that usually clouded her visits back home. The evening had started off well enough. We were at my mom's house, my aunt's laughter echoing through the kitchen as she cooked, the smell of spices filling the air, a reminder of so many childhood meals. It felt good to be home, even if home now had the bittersweet edge of missing voices and past grievances. My mom and my aunt, they've always had this way of making even the simplest meal feel like a feast, and tonight was no exception. I was looking forward to a quiet evening, just family, sharing stories and catching up. The kids, exhausted by the day's adventures, fell asleep almost as soon as their heads hit the pillows. I kissed them goodnight and headed downstairs where my mom and aunt were in the kitchen, glasses of wine in hand, ostensibly relaxed. The murmur of their conversation greeted me as I approached, but it was my wife's name that caught my attention, halting my steps. "She thinks she's too good for us," my aunt's voice floated up, tinged with resentment. There was a clink of glass, probably my mom nodding in agreement as she added, "Yes, but don't bring it up around him. She's a snob, but it's not worth the argument." It stung, hearing that. There in the dim light of the stairwell, a knot tightened in my stomach. My wife has always been meticulous about how she interacts with my family, careful never to flaunt her background or make anyone feel less. She'd go out of her way to connect, to show interest in their lives, even if it meant stepping out of her comfort zone. Her reticence at times, I knew, was out of a fear of overstepping, not a feeling of superiority. Hearing my wife referred to in such terms, by my own family, sparked a heat in my chest that was hard to tamp down. I lingered on the stairs, unseen, the familiar ache of being caught between the people I loved surfacing once again. They continued, oblivious to my presence, airing grievances that were usually spoken in hushed tones behind closed doors. I wrestled with my emotions, debating whether to confront them or retreat. The decision was made for me when my mom glanced up and caught my eye, her expression shifting from surprise to something like guilt. The conversation snapped off, replaced by a tense silence that filled the room like smoke. "I heard what you said," I found myself speaking, my voice steadier than I felt. My aunt tried to brush it off, saying it was just a slip of the tongue, but the damage was done. The air was thick with unsaid things, with years of miscommunications and hurt feelings. I explained, maybe more sharply than I intended, that my wife had never acted superior, that she simply prioritized her career and our family's well-being over everything else. My wife grew up in a world quite different from mine. Born into a wealthy family, she was the only child, the sole focus of her parents' affection and hopes. Tragically, her parents passed away when she was still in her teens, an event that thrust her into premature adulthood. They left her everything, their sprawling estate, significant investments, and various other assets. Despite the wealth and responsibilities that fell on her shoulders at such a young age, she never let it define her. Instead, she channeled her energies into her studies and later, her career, proving to everyone that her achievements were born of her own intelligence and hard work, not just her inheritance. She enjoys the finer things in life, sure, the kind of luxury she grew up with. High-end fashion, gourmet foods, vacations in far-flung destinations. But she carries it all with a grace and an ease that's devoid of arrogance. She's unapologetic about her tastes, yes, but never ostentatious. In contrast, I come from a solidly middle-class background. My family's world was smaller, our means more modest. We valued hard work, simple pleasures, and close community ties. Our house, always filled with warmth and laughter, was humble but happy. This stark difference in our upbringings was never lost on me, and initially I worried about how my family would perceive her, or she them. Despite these differences, my wife has never behaved superiorly or looked down on my upbringing. She's been nothing but respectful towards my family, always engaging in conversations, offering to help with meals during visits, and bringing thoughtful gifts that showed her attention to what they might appreciate, not just expensive items for the sake of display. Yet the underlying class difference sometimes creates an unspoken tension, especially with my mother. Mom, with her down-to-earth values and no-nonsense approach to life, has sometimes struggled to connect with my wife's world. Though my wife has made every effort to bridge the gap, ensuring she doesn't flaunt her wealth or make my family feel uncomfortable, there's always been a subtle, perhaps imagined, barrier there. This difference in backgrounds is sometimes amplified by the innocuous comments at family gatherings, or the slightly too long glances at my wife's designer clothes and accessories. I know it comes more from a place of unfamiliarity and perhaps a bit of envy, rather than any real disapproval. My wife understands this too, and handles such situations with a kindness and a deftness that make me love her all the more. She tries to put my family at ease, often downplaying her lifestyle and focusing on the many things we all have in common. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, the frustration evident in my voice. It was clear they hadn't intended for me to hear their words, and my mom's face fell, an apology forming on her lips. My aunt, ever the more confrontational, didn't back down. She doesn't mingle with us like she's one of us because she thinks she's better. She stated bluntly, her eyes challenging me to contradict her. That hurt. It hurt because it wasn't true. "That's not it," I replied, my voice firm. "She's trying her best. Just because she doesn't always know how to show it, doesn't mean she feels she's above us. You're misreading her caution as contempt." My mom, softer, more apologetic, tried to soothe the rising tension. "We're just not used to her ways. That's all. Maybe we misjudged her a bit. She conceded, her eyes avoiding mine. But the damage was done. The evening's warmth evaporated, replaced by a chill that no amount of familial bond could easily dispel. I sat down with them, trying to explain further, sharing how my wife had often expressed her worries about not fitting in, about being seen as an outsider. It was a long conversation, one filled with admissions and reluctant understanding. My aunt listened, her expression showing defiance. They clearly didn't expect me to hear any of it, and my aunt said that my wife's refusal to interact with them is because she thinks she's better than them. I explained that isn't the case, but my aunt kept pushing the issue. Eventually my mom said it was fine if my wife felt that way, but I shouldn't defend her classist behavior. At this point I snapped and said that my wife resents my mom because she wasn't around when I was a kid. My mom and aunt didn't say anything to that, and I went back upstairs. After the conversation with my mom and aunt, the house felt colder, quieter. I needed to clear my head, so I stepped out onto the back porch, the night air crisp against my skin. Pulling out my phone, I sent a quick text to my sister, hoping she could offer some perspective. She's always had a way of seeing the middle ground, even when emotions ran high. Her response came back almost immediately, a testament to how often she played mediator in our family. Just apologize to mom and aunt, okay? It's not worth the fight. That was just like her, always advocating for peace, even if it meant swallowing your pride. I stared at the phone, her words glowing in the dim light. It wasn't that simple for me. I didn't hold a grudge against mom for the choices she made when we were kids. I understood they were made under the weight of immense grief. But hearing her and my aunt speak so dismissively about my wife, as if her efforts to fit in and respect their ways meant nothing, stirred a defensiveness in me I couldn't easily quash. It wasn't just the words themselves that had cut deep, it was the realization that these conversations had probably happened before, not just tonight. That my mom and aunt had likely shared these thoughts between themselves, painting my wife in a light that was so far from the truth. It felt like a betrayal, not just to my wife, but to the efforts we'd both made to bridge our very different worlds. Sitting there in the quiet of the night, I typed out a response to my sister. I get what you're saying, but it's not just about making peace. They don't see how hard she tries, or how their words might make her feel unwelcome. I didn't expect my sister to fully understand. Her approach was different, shaped by her own experiences and personality. I knew I would eventually need to address this with mom and my aunt, to clear the air, or at least to make my stance clear. But I also knew an apology from me wouldn't fix the underlying issue, that my family still held on to preconceived notions about my wife, notions that weren't fair or accurate. The house was quiet, the only sounds the occasional distant bark of a neighborhood dog, and the soft hum of the refrigerator. The conversation with my mom and aunt had left a palpable tension hanging in the air, thick enough to choke on. Alone in the small guest room where we were staying, I replayed the evening's events over in my mind, each word and sharp glance looping endlessly. In hindsight, I could see where I might have approached things differently. Maybe I could have been calmer, more diplomatic, instead of letting my emotions get the best of me. But in that moment, hearing them talk about my wife like that, someone who had tried so hard to be part of this family, despite feeling like an outsider, it felt like an instinctive need to protect her had overridden everything else. My wife wasn't just my partner, she was the mother of my children, the person who stood by me unconditionally. Defending her wasn't just a reaction, it felt like a duty. I leaned back against the headboard, the mattress creaking slightly under my weight. The room was filled with old family photos and knickknacks, a stark reminder of the deep roots and history my family had in this place. It made my decision even more difficult knowing that leaving early would be like admitting defeat, like letting those petty comments drive us away. But staying felt untenable too, with every forced smile and careful conversation just adding layers to an already thick facade. The kids were asleep in the next room, blissfully unaware of the grown-up complexities clouding the air around them. I didn't want their memories of this trip to be marred by a sense of underlying conflict, or to feel the tension that I was so acutely aware of. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through it aimlessly for a few moments before I made the decision. I'd booked flights for us to go back home earlier than planned. It wasn't just about escaping an uncomfortable situation. It was about preserving the peace and mental well-being of my family. My wife, who hadn't even come on this trip, deserved to know that her feelings were validated, not just by words, but by actions. As I looked up flights, I realized this was more than just a logistical change. It was a statement. I wasn't just leaving early, I was making it clear that while family was important, the respect and well-being of my immediate family, my wife and kids, came first. She's not opposed to the idea of visiting my home country, and has done so in the past. Her job is just very demanding, and she said she'd rather do a longer trip with the four of us. We have 2 kids, when she can arrange more time off and the trip isn't solely based on seeing my mom. My wife's relationship with my home country, and especially with my family, is complicated to say the least. She's not against the idea of visiting. In fact, she's joined me several times before. But her job in corporate law is demanding. Long hours, constant deadlines, high stakes. That kind of pressure doesn't pause for anything, not even family trips across the globe. She's practical about it. She told me once, over a late dinner while the kids were already in bed, that she would rather wait and take a longer trip together with the four of us. If we're going to travel that far, let's make it a real vacation, not just a quick visit, she had said. Her logic was sound. It wasn't just about the travel time but also about the opportunity to truly relax and enjoy each other's company, without the shadow of obligations or past tensions lurking in the background. The last part is crucial because the trips to see my mom have often been tense. It's nobody's fault, really. It's just that their worlds are so different, and my mom has this way of making her opinions known in a manner that's a bit too straightforward for my wife, who is accustomed to the more measured, polite exchanges of her professional world. So, this time around, when the opportunity came for me and the kids to visit my mom, my wife encouraged us to go while she stayed behind to manage a major case at work. She framed it as practicality, not preference. Go. Have fun with your mom. The kids miss her, and it's important they spend time with her, she had said, kissing me goodbye as we headed for the airport. She's always been clear about boundaries. If my mom were to visit us, she would welcome her with open arms, offer her the guest room, cook her meals, and engage in pleasant conversation. There's no animosity, just a preference to avoid situations she knows will be uncomfortable. This isn't just about personal comfort, it's about maintaining peace, about ensuring that when we do spend time together, it's quality time, not just obligated time filled with awkwardness and forced conversations. My wife has always been very composed about her feelings towards my mom. She isn't the type to harp on things unnecessarily. Early on, back when our relationship was shifting from serious to truly committed around the time of our engagement, I asked her point blank about her hesitation towards my mom. It was a quiet evening, just the two of us cleaning up after a quiet dinner at home, when I broached the topic. Her response was straightforward, devoid of any malice. She explained that the unease stemmed from my mom's long absence in my childhood, which to her signaled potential complexities in family dynamics she'd rather not entangle herself with more than necessary. She wasn't judgmental about it, she just laid out her feelings with the kind of clarity and foresight she applies to most things in life. It's about ensuring we have less stress in our interactions, so we can enjoy our time together as a family when it happens, she had said, her tone even, but firm. That conversation set the tone for how things would be, and true to her word, she hasn't brought it up unless absolutely necessary. Over the years, becoming a parent myself has opened my eyes further to her perspective. The thought of not being there for my kids, of leaving them prematurely, is unbearable. I see now how my wife's understanding of family and commitment could be so deeply affected by my mom's choices. Having children has a way of amplifying the protective instincts, the desire for stability and presence. It's clarified for me why my wife places such a premium on these qualities, and it's helped me appreciate her stance, even if I don't always fully share her reservations. Update. It's been a few months since I made my post. After reading your comments, I realized it would be rash to leave without trying to sort things out, so I had a conversation with my mom the next morning when my aunt was out and my kids were still in bed. The morning after the tense conversation with my mom and aunt, I approached my mom for a private talk. The house was quiet, with soft light filtering through the curtains, casting a calm over the living room where we decided to sit down. I could tell she was apprehensive about the discussion, perhaps worried about more confrontations. I started by apologizing for my outburst the previous night. My tone was firm yet conciliatory. I wanted to clear the air but also to stand by my wife's perspective, which I felt was important to communicate clearly. I'm sorry for how I reacted, I began. But we need to talk about why you think it's okay to say those things about my wife. My mom nodded, her expression one of regret mixed with a hint of defensiveness. She listened as I reiterated that the comments I overheard were hurtful and simply not true. If there are issues, we should be able to discuss them openly, not just let them fester, I added, hoping to establish a more open line of communication. My mom sighed, a long, weary exhalation that seemed to carry the weight of the past decades. I understand, but you need to see where I'm coming from too, she responded. She then explained how isolating it was for her after my dad passed away, how she needed to be around her own family back home to grieve. It wasn't about escaping from you or your sister, she insisted. I listened, trying to bridge my understanding with her experience. I get that, Mom, and I don't think anyone faults you for needing support, I said. But my wife sees it differently. She can't understand leaving kids behind during such a critical time, regardless of the grief. My mom bristled slightly at this. It's unfair for her to judge my actions from back then. She wasn't there. She didn't see the pain I was in. Her voice broke a little, her eyes conveying the turmoil of those days. You and your sister don't hold it against me, do you? I shook my head, trying to reassure her while also explaining my wife's point of view. We don't resent you, Mom, because we love you and we know you did what you felt was necessary. But you have to understand that my wife views family responsibilities differently, especially now that we have our own kids. The conversation moved slowly, with pauses that were filled with unspoken thoughts and regrets. I stressed that my wife's feelings were valid, just as her actions had been to her at the time. It's not about right or wrong, I concluded. It's about understanding each other's perspectives and finding a way to respect them. I can't make my wife forgive you, Mom, I said, trying to keep my voice even despite the frustration building inside me. And I need you to stop speaking poorly about her. It's important you tell Aunt Jane to do the same. Mom listened, her expression a mix of understanding and helplessness. I'll do what I can, you know I will, she replied. But then she added, but I can't control what your aunt says or does, she has her opinions. This response frustrated me further. But don't you see? It's not just about opinions. It's about respect. If there's talk like that going on, it creates an environment I don't want around our kids. They pick up on everything, Mom. The idea of my children overhearing such comments about their mother worried me deeply. I can't be comfortable in a place where my wife, their mom, is disrespected. It's not just about us adults, it's about what kind of example we set for them. Mom nodded slowly, seemingly understanding the gravity of my concerns, but she held firm on her stance about my aunt. I'll talk to her, I promise. I'll try to make her see. But you know how she is, stubborn, and I can't openly criticize her. She's helped me through a lot. The room fell silent for a moment as I processed her words. The sunlight streaming through the window cast long shadows across the floor, a stark reminder of the day moving forward while we seemed stuck in this impasse. I looked at my mom, seeing the years of strain etched into her face, realizing that her relationship with her sister was just as complex as any other family dynamic. I understand she's family, I finally said. And I get that you've supported each other through thick and thin. But this is important. It's about protecting my family's well-being. Mom sighed, a sound of resignation mixed with resolve. I'll do my best, she repeated, her tone more assured this time. No one should feel unwelcome in my home. Things weren't going anywhere, so I told my mom I was going to go home early. She got upset and defensive, and I realized she would also keep bad-mouthing my wife, just when I wasn't around. That was the final straw. I went back upstairs and got flights for the next day. I sent my wife a text saying we'd be home early and I'd explain when I got back, but everyone was alive and healthy. She said that she was looking forward to it and asked if I wanted to call, but I just wanted to do it all in person. The next 24 hours in my mom's house were like walking on a tightrope, each of us carefully navigating around the tension that had settled in the air after our talk. The house, usually filled with the comforting smells of home-cooked meals and the sounds of casual family chatter, now felt unnaturally quiet, as if everyone was holding their breath, waiting for something to break the silence. As we packed up our things, the kids obliviously chattered about the trip, unaware of the undercurrents swirling around them. They were excited about going home, talking non-stop about showing their mom the souvenirs they had picked out for her. I tried to match their enthusiasm, but my mind was preoccupied with the conversation I'd had with my mom and the unresolved issues it left hanging between us. Finally, with our bags packed and the car loaded, I went to say goodbye to my mom. She stood in the doorway, her posture tense. There was a vulnerability in her eyes that I hadn't seen in a long time. When will I see you and the kids again? She asked, her voice thick with emotion. I took a deep breath, knowing my answer would be difficult for her to hear. Mom, I want you in our lives, you know that. But things need to change before we come back. My wife deserves to be treated with respect, and I can't justify bringing the kids into a situation where that might not happen. The words hung heavily between us. Mom looked down, nodding slowly. I understand, she murmured. I'll work on things with your aunt. I promise. Her voice was sincere, and I believed her intent, but the reality of the situation was more complex than just promises made in the moment. I hope so, Mom, because we miss you. But I need to put my wife and kids first, I continued, trying to keep my tone gentle yet firm. It was essential for her to understand that while I cherished our family ties, I couldn't compromise on the values I wanted to teach my children, about respect and kindness. Mom reached out, pulling me into a hug, a bit of the old warmth returning momentarily. Give them my love, she said, her voice muffled against my shoulder. Tell them Grandma thinks about them every day. As I got into the car and drove away, the image of my mom standing in the doorway lingered in my rearview mirror. When I got home, the sense of relief was palpable. After the tension of the last few days, walking through the door to see my wife in the familiar surroundings of our own space was grounding. She greeted me with a hug that seemed to physically lift the weight off my shoulders. The kids were already asleep, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the dishwasher in the background. We settled down in the living room, her on the couch with a cup of tea, me in the armchair across from her. She waited patiently as I recounted everything that had happened, my conversation with my mom, the awkward silence that followed, and the strained goodbye. When I told her about what happened, about the comments my mom and aunt had made, she let out a small laugh, more out of resignation than amusement. "Well, I'm glad I only got upgraded to a snob," she said wryly. "It could have been much worse." Her attempt at lightening the mood was appreciated, but her eyes were serious, concerned about the impact of what had transpired. "I stood up for you," I said, wanting her to know that her dignity was something I defended unequivocally. I made it clear that we couldn't just brush those comments under the rug. She reached across to squeeze my hand, her smile warm. "Thank you. That means a lot to me. Not just that you stood up for me, but that you're thinking about what this means for us as a family." The conversation shifted then to what the future held for my relationship with my mom. I told her we need some space. I continued, that I still want her in our lives, but our immediate family has to come first. My wife nodded, understanding the difficulty of the decision. "I support whatever you need to do," she said. "Just know that whatever distance you need to put, I'm here for you. We're in this together." Her words were reassuring, reinforcing that the choices I was making were not just my own burden to bear but something we navigated together as partners. "I think it's the best thing for now," I concluded, feeling a bit more confident in our path forward. "It'll give everyone some time to reflect and hopefully heal a bit." She smiled, that same reassuring smile that had seen us through countless other challenges. "I'm proud of you," she added. "It's not easy standing up to family, but you're doing what's best for us. That's what matters." It's been several months since we returned from that charged visit to see my mom, and life at home has settled into a comfortable rhythm. The kids are thriving, oblivious to the adult complexities that sometimes shadow the edges of family life. My wife and I have found solace in the normalcy of our daily routines: work, school runs, weekend soccer games. Despite the undercurrents of that trip, our home life feels solid, anchored. I've made it a point to keep in touch with my mom, dialing her number every couple of weeks. But each call seems to resurrect a bit of the tension from our last visit. Her voice often carries a tightness that wasn't there before, and our conversations are punctuated by long pauses where words used to flow easily. It's clear she's still processing the boundaries I set, and perhaps feeling a bit isolated by them. My sister, who has always been the peacemaker in the family, tells me during our own calls that she's keeping up her regular chats with Mom. She mentions that Mom feels judged, not just by what happened during our last visit but by the enduring echo of her past decisions. "She's still hurting," my sister explained one evening, her voice laced with concern. "She feels like everyone's holding her grief against her." I listen, and I try to understand. Grief is a strange, malleable thing that touches everyone differently. I hope with time, Mom will see that it's not about judgment but about understanding each other's boundaries and emotional spaces. As much as I want my kids to have a relationship with their grandmother, their only living grandparent, I'm acutely aware of the need to protect my wife's emotional well-being. She's been incredibly supportive and understanding, but I know the situation has been hard on her too. The balance is delicate, trying to navigate these waters without tipping anyone overboard. Since becoming a father, my perspective on family and relationships has shifted significantly. It's like my children have opened up new chambers in my heart and mind, chambers filled with deeper empathy and understanding, especially towards my wife. Watching her as a mother, seeing her dedication and the boundless love she pours into our children, I find myself constantly amazed and grateful for her presence in our lives. The thought of losing her, of my kids facing life without their mother, sends a cold shiver down my spine. It's something I can't even bear to think about for too long. This fear, this visceral reaction, it helps me understand why she's so sensitive about family matters and why she's been so adamant about setting boundaries with my mom. It's not just about past grievances or discomfort. It's about ensuring our family unit remains stable and supported, no matter what. Reflecting on this has also given me a fresh lens through which to view my own childhood. I forgive my mother for her choices during our most difficult times, decisions made while she was engulfed in her own sea of grief. I know that she did what she felt was necessary to survive emotionally, even though it meant being physically distant from me and my sister. Forgiveness, however, doesn't erase the understanding of the impact of those decisions. It doesn't wipe away the fact that those choices left marks, shaping how I view relationships and responsibilities. This empathy I hold for my wife, stemming from our shared parenting journey, makes me think about how I would feel if the roles were reversed, if it had been her parents who had left her in a similar situation. Honestly, I doubt I could easily forgive such an action. The mere idea stirs a protective instinct in me that is fierce and uncompromising. I would want to shield her from that kind of pain, just as I try to protect our children from any hurt or unnecessary hardship. This has led to many conversations between us, sometimes late into the night when the world is quiet and it's just the two of us, sharing our thoughts and fears. These discussions are sometimes tough, but they're always cathartic. They bring us closer, aligning our understanding and approach to how we manage our relationships with our extended family. Thanks for all your advice. For those of you who said I should get therapy, I am doing fine, but thanks for the concern.